Climate change is worrying in a way that the needs are getting different.
Конечно, очень хочется, чтобы жизнь вернулась в поселок.
Covid-19 pandemisi özellikle dezavantajlı grup olarak adettiğimiz Suriyeli mültecileri de çok derinden sarstı.
Our support is still needed.
Climate change is worrying in a way that the needs are getting different.
Конечно, очень хочется, чтобы жизнь вернулась в поселок.
Covid-19 pandemisi özellikle dezavantajlı grup olarak adettiğimiz Suriyeli mültecileri de çok derinden sarstı.
Our support is still needed.
So good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to the audience who is also joining online. And I apologize for a slight delay in the start of this session due to the delay from the previous session, which was discussing humanitarian diplomacy. So an important subject for this forum. But thank you for being here now. The subject of this talk today is digitalization of humanitarian aid and support to innovation. This is a key priority for the European Commission, not only in the context of humanitarian aid policy, but also more generally in terms of digital Europe, which is a key priority for the von der Leyen Commission. Digitalization is not a distance promise. It's something that is happening now. It is something that is happening around us. It may not always be applied in a coordinated way, but certainly digital tools are becoming an increasing integral part of how we deliver humanitarian assistance. Innovation, and particularly digital innovation, is a great potential to enable both earlier, more accountable and more effective humanitarian action. But with digital technologies becoming today's realities, we also face challenges. And I think one of the parts of our discussions today is how we address those challenges in order to ensure that we can apply it best in the humanitarian sector. So, for example, these are not new issues when we speak about digital tools, data collection, and how these can exacerbate existing risks and challenges. DG ECHO aims to work together with our humanitarian partners to set an enabling framework for digitalization, and this was also one of the key priorities that was listed in the humanitarian aid communication that was adopted in March last year. And I think as DG ECHO, together with other partners, our role is really in trying to support this enabling framework for digital transformation. So we see this talk very much as one of those building blocks in which to build a path forward. I'm pleased to introduce the three panelists that we have today in our discussion. I'll start with Manuel Patria from Humanity and Inclusion. He's the Global Managing Director and Humanitarian and Inclusion, were the double awardees for the EU's Prize for Humanitarian Innovation in 2020. Congratulations. They are one of the organizations that lead the way in supporting development and scaling up of innovations through their Innovation Fund. We will also be joined online by Balthasar Sterlin, who is the head of the Digital Transformation and Data section of the ICRC. ICRC has been one of the strongest exponents of digital transformation amongst humanitarian organizations, and their work in particular on addressing some of the risks of digitalization, for example, through the publication of their handbook on data protection and humanitarian action. And also their Digitarium initiative has been an important development for this sector. We also have with us this afternoon Hans-Jörg Strohmeyer, who is the Chief of the Policy Development and Studies branch in OCHA. And OCHA has been playing indeed a leading role in examining how digital tools can make us more anticipatory, how they can help us to address the humanitarian funding gap, which is one of the key themes also of this talk. So we have basically 3 rounds of questions in this subject. One which looks at the benefits of digitalization. The second part which looks at the challenges of digitalization, and also I think the final part, which is very important also for DG ECHO, which is what needs to be done in order for us to support this framework to drive digital transformation. I will invite our 3 speakers to answer around 3 rounds of questions, and I ask you to stick to the time, 3 minutes per question. And perhaps I can start and kick off with my first question, which is why are your organizations supporting digital transformation, and what are the benefits that you see to supporting digital tools and delivering on such innovation? And I'll hand the floor to Manuel first. Manuel?
So thank you for welcoming me in this session. I'm very happy to be with you today. It's true that when I joined HI 8 years ago, we thought through a very ambitious strategy, a 10-year strategy, and we wanted to bring that 10-year strategy, which is very rare, having this long-term perspective, because we really wanted to transform this organization on one of the points was digitalization. It's true that with the growing needs, booming needs, humanitarian needs, and the fact that the commitments that we are taking are increasing in terms of accountability. Well, I'm not going to go into all the buzzwords, but obviously taking the CEO perspective, I was really impressed by all the new commitment that we have to take year after year. It's a kind of piling up. And the only way to be able to manage all these new commitments, whether it's GDPR, whether it's cyber criminality, whether it's accountability to donors, whether it's even coordination and mutualization with other actors. The only way we could actually manage and deal with that was actually to find ways, and actually digitalization clearly identify one of the means to build that efficiency. Within HI today, we are actually deploying 6 major information systems at the same time. On some of the systems are interconnected with other organizations, so we can collaborate better. We are also, deploying our fundraising, digital fundraising. It's really key today to be able to, reach a new generation of donors. If you're not digital today, you will not reach these new donors. We are also, of course, changing the game in terms of operations, and that's most probably the theme that I will come back to in the other questions, because the most important part is really our operations, and that's how we got those 2 prizes last year with Europe. And that was I was really pleased to have those 2 prizes. And I'll come back to that, because I think that was really 2 achievements that we want to scale up in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Manuel. Perhaps I can hand over to Balthazar.
Oh. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here and be able to engage with you. I think if we talk about how we think about digital transformation, we really try to do it from a people-centric point of view. What does it actually mean for people to adjust to digitally transform the world in terms of opportunities and risks, and how can we reinforce the trust that the ICSC's action hinges upon. So I think that's, in a way, the lens through which we look at it. So now if you talk a little bit about the benefits, and I think we'll come later also to the challenges, what is very important from our view is, of course, we try to be close to people. So we try to complement the physical proximity with a digital proximity, namely if we cannot directly reach people. I think there is a huge benefit also in terms of bi-directional engagement. So people can talk back to you, can communicate with you, can also perhaps a little bit level the inherent power relationship between humanitarian organizations and people in need of services. And that's, of course, particularly acute in situations of armed conflict, which are the kind of situations the International Committee of the Red Cross focuses on. The benefits are clearly greater humanitarian impact. I think there is also an important benefit in terms of the scalability of services. And if I think namely about digitizing existing services, but also adding new digital services. So ideally faster, but also better targeted services due to better analytics and due to better data. Information as aid is an incredibly important vector where digital technology can really be a force multiplier. There is, of course, an issue of reduced costs. The needs are such that we also have as humanitarian organizations really to think about how can we be the most efficient. Now, examples, and I will just give a couple of examples on issues we work on, is of course artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think typically of the digital matching when we try to find missing persons, when families try to find missing members of their family, the digital technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence can be a great help in that effort. That is important. I think we use virtual reality is very promising. We use it to influence behavior. We use it to train the armed forces, police forces to influence detaining authorities. Satellite technology, very interesting also in terms of trying to crowdsource, map water points, etc. I realize I'm running out of time, but I think these are just examples where we do have to move forward and also in partnership, not only use technologies, but also develop technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we pass over to Hans-Jörg.
Yes, thank you very much. And also thank you for having us. And it's great to be on the panel with old friends like Balthasar and Manuel. Maybe just picking up from where Balthasar left it, the benefits are very clear. It's better targeting and impact. It's often cheaper. It's more local. It's closer to the community. A lot of these initiatives are actually operated by communities or by local initiatives. There's less big logistics that we have to carry out. And very often we have a much better understanding of needs, risks, and vulnerabilities. So clear operational benefits. Let me maybe also highlight some of the examples, because I think only then the vast potential of new technology becomes clear. Predictive analytics have managed to allocate funding as part of anticipatory action, as we call it now, based on forecasting frameworks and so on, ahead of time to communities for famines in Somalia, for flooding in Bangladesh and in other places. So predictive analytics help better targeting ahead of disasters. Artificial intelligence have helped with UAV collected images and assess vulnerabilities better. Biometrics have in refugee camps for the first time ever allowed refugees who for 30 years didn't have any identification to have IDs. Drones can operate flying labs around the world by local actors for local actors. 3D printers have brought water pipes and helped to repair water pipes in Nepal after earthquakes. And I think COVID has very clearly shown, particularly in 2020 and 2021, the advantages. Biometrics and blockchain digital cash have allowed contactless delivery of aid to communities. Drones have brought medical supply and testing kits to communities. Chatbots have delivered vital information and telehealth support to communities. I'm just mentioning these examples because I think those examples make clear that, as you said at the very beginning, this is just not just a take on the future. This is what's happening right now. And the biggest challenge for us is how we do that, how we do include this into our aid packages more consistently and roll it out and mainstream it across the various operations and the partnerships that we need for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans-Jörg. And indeed, it is quite an impressive list, which you all added to, so bravo for that. But what I'm hearing is higher impact, faster, better targeted, reduced costs, better efficiency, but also all the other issues such as predictive analytics, which can also be very useful in humanitarian action and our new anticipatory action approaches. So I think we are all convinced about the benefits, but perhaps what we need to turn to now is, why aren't we going to go fully digital tomorrow? What are the challenges that we have to tackle in order to unblock the benefits of digitalization? So perhaps I turn to Manuel on the challenges first.
Well, thank you. Obviously, there are many challenges, the expertise and the skills of our employees, but the fact that sometimes we don't have access to networks or we don't have power, but that's obvious constraints. But I would maybe focus on one constraint that maybe it's not going to be politically correct, but which is sometimes we have the strong resistance to change of our employees. That's maybe something we would not consider as being obvious, but I would, since I don't have a lot of time, and I'm pretty sure that nobody is going to mention that, I'm going to put that on the table. Obviously, we have a very committed workforce. They're of course completely involved on high will, high skill when it comes to humanitarian aid and expertise, but sometimes technology comes as a rather the second best solution, and sometimes they are their own. They bring their own view to the problem. Maybe they consider that the participants or the beneficiaries will actually not accept the digital service, and they will take that as their own judgment, even though they haven't actually tested the solution. We have actually made an interesting survey. One of our nice innovation about digitalization is that we do print our thesis and prosthesis on 3D printing, and we have a tele-rehabilitation system. So we do rehab remotely, if I may say so. But actually, when we start those projects, we have some resistance from our crew and from our employees. And we tested that. 55% before a project are actually either not aware or not willing to test actually these new methods. And actually, when the pilot is done or the project is done, we retest, and actually they're 100% supporting the new technology. So from 55 to 100. And if we ask the beneficiaries, the figure is quite high. They're 90% actually support the innovation. And this is a strong innovation because this is about having a rehab session done remotely. So it's pretty strong, and it's about having a prosthesis that has been printed by a 3D printer. So I think, if there's a lessons learned, it's really about making sure that, while of course keeping the perspective of doing no harm, but I think make sure that we move to the pilot phase as soon as possible. We move to the solution to the ground as much as possible, as soon as possible, so that we can overcome our own resistance to change.
Thank you very much. The human element also coming in very strongly there. Can I ask Hans-Jörg?
Yes, maybe just to build upon what Manuel just said, and I can very much relate to that resistance factor that you mentioned. But I have sort of 3 or 4 key issues. The digital divide that you mentioned, of course, is enormous, and we have to realize just one fact that exemplifies how big the issue is. In 2019, only 19% of individuals in least developed countries were able to use the internet. 19% in least developed countries. So that shows that this digital divide is a real issue, and we need to incorporate into our strategies, not get carried away by the opportunities, but to incorporate very tailor-made solutions to the environments that we work in. And that means we may need to include in low tech contexts, we may need to embrace in our aid packages not only hardware, but also not only software, but also digital hardware solutions to provide the connectivity and the internet that we need for better targeting. The second point is just to underscore what I think Balthasar is going to talk about and mentioned earlier. New tech is not a panacea. It doesn't replace proximity. And I think the last 2 years, our own experiences during COVID have shown this. Engagement with communities still remains key and pivotal. A third part is that, of course, we need to use this in a responsible, sustainable, and inclusive manner. So there are various discussions out there around standards, data protection, responsibility, which are critical. My biggest point, I don't want us to forget this, is the biggest threat that come from cyber challenges. It is absolutely mind-boggling if you look at some of the figures. In 2020, more than 93% of health organizations have experienced data breaches. It's critical infrastructure, healthcare facilities, energy supplies, a lockdown of telecoms and internet. And I could go on with the list to banking services, large misinformation, disinformation that is being launched upon us, and we've all experienced over the last years. So the number and frequency of these events, the use of malware is rising, and we in the humanitarian community need to become much, much more cyber resilient and invest more into understanding what this does to our operations, what it does to data sets and healthcare facilities and the people we serve, and be better prepared. So just a point, in terms of the challenges, I think cyber poses probably the biggest challenge that we have ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans-Jörg. Balthasar, would you like to pick up on the issue of the challenge? I think the issue of cyber resilience being something that's coming out quite strongly.
With pleasure. And perhaps to echo what Hans-Jörg just said so well, ICC doesn't project itself as an organization that will go fully digital. So I think we have to challenge, not to challenge, but they have to think, what's the extent of the use of digital technology? And as a neutral intermediary, as an organization that has to dialogue with over 400 non-state armed groups, visiting prisoners, you can't do that digitally. The trust building will, from my perspective, always require boots on the ground. But the question is, how do you then use digital technology to reinforce an organization's respective DNA, mandate, ambition? And I think there we need to look both at elements that hold us objectively back, but also on elements that we rightly have to pause and reflect and be thoughtful about. So sometimes not hastening into new technologies, but thinking the implications through is clearly important for organizations that have a protection element in their mandate. Now, Manuel, and I won't come back to that, but I totally agree, mentioned the digital literacy, the digital dexterity. We have 20,000 people in some 100 countries. So how can we ensure, it's a cultural element to it, that we get our staff to the right level of skills in countries that may have different degrees of access to connectivity, and also a population that is technologically savvy or not. Now, cybersecurity, hugely important. We have unfortunately suffered a cyber attack and had a breach of data, of our family data, where we have a system for National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. And I think one question that will stay with us is, which is the level of cybersecurity that humanitarian organizations should have, how much per each euro can we invest in cybersecurity, what is the kind of level we should aspire to. Data, of course, the new oil, but also the new asbestos. Digital technologies always produce data. How can we ensure that we control the data, that it isn't used against people? That's a question of policies and standard data protection standards, accountabilities, but it's also a question of what kind of technology we use as humanitarian organizations and how are we responsible about it. I think a theme that we will see emerge is, of course, that the world will become more and more polarized. The internet will become a splinter net. The technology will become more and more politically connotated. Maybe humanitarian organizations in 5 years, their neutrality may be judged on what kind of technology, if it is available across the globe, which has to be seen, they will use. So that the politicization of technology is clearly something that will be also a challenge for the ICSC and for humanitarian organizations at large. And perhaps lastly, Hans-Jörg mentioned it, the misinformation, the disinformation, the hate speech, the fog of war, the information warfare that can also involve humanitarian organizations and create manipulation and misunderstandings will be a massive challenge in tomorrow's war zones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, it's clear that there are a number of challenges. I think it's also, there is a common understanding of what the challenges are. But I also hear that there are ways to surmount these challenges. And this is what brings us to a key point of this discussion where DG ECHO is reflecting on its policy approach in digitalization. And there, back to you to ask you what you would see as your 3 top priorities in terms of what we need to do in terms to deliver on these benefits while being very conscious of the need not to leave anyone behind. What for you would be a role for DG ECHO in setting forward this policy approach? But again, Manuel, since you are here.
Thank you. I think there is clearly this question of scale up. It's true that if I take the Terefa project that was awarded last year, so the project of digitalization of 3D printing for prosthesis and orthosis on remote rehabilitation session. Obviously today, to develop that and to scale up that beyond the few projects that we have today, we need to convince more donors on today. It's interesting to see that there are some resistance. It's not a given that even though we have proven the value, it's not a given that we will be able to scale up actually through donors. So it has to do a lot with how we will actually fundraise differently than with institutional donors. But so, I mean, maybe that's a question for ECHO, clearly, how to help us scale up our innovations. There is another one which actually deals with developing an ecosystem of innovation. I think there were different words and buzzwords that were actually mentioned, but it's obvious that there's a lot of things going on around, artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, image analysis. On here, obviously, maybe ECHO could, support the development of some kind of communities of practice. Because we're learning and we can share, and again, if we want to interconnect or open innovation, but also making sure that this is a well-connected effort. I think communities will be good to animate. We have done something with the university. We have actually made an Innovation for Humanity Alliance with an Institute of Applied Science in Lyon. So that alliance is interesting because it's really about making sure that we bring university also around the table. It's good for them, of course, because their students are quite keen on working on humanitarian project. It's good for companies that can finance that because it's part of the ESG, CSR, and brand value. So it's good for everybody. Through that, we were able to organize innovation nights. So mobilizing university is also something important. And of course, through that, you could even think of having a professional training course on humanitarian engineering, because this is actually, there is a lot of electrical, any engineering school that you could think of, they could clearly have an engineering course on humanitarian. I mean, they should open this to humanitarian. I think that will be of a lot of value. Last but not least, if we think in terms of technologies, there's some barrier for us. Typically, if we take the drones, the other innovation that was rewarded last year, we put some technology on drones. We're able to use drones to actually demine. So it's for us an interesting. We put actually infrared on the payload on the drone, and that helps us to have a much better productivity on the demining field. But actually, there are some technology that we have no access, or there are technologies that are very military-driven technology that we will actually not work with military companies for different ethical reasons. So how can we, find a way through ECO, through Europe, to have access to different technology that actually today are not accessible to us? Maybe GDPR, ground penetrating radar, so other technologies that we could put on the payload. That's another avenue that we could discuss, of course.
Thank you. Hans-Jörg?
Yes. No, maybe let me also start with the obvious point, the scale-up point. Our study that we launched last year on new technologies is called From Digital Promise to Frontline Practice, which sort of try to capture that there is a lot of good examples, and all of us have noted a number of them. But the challenge still is that very few of them have become mainstream, are consistently applied across the board, and so on. And I think we need to realize that this is not doable just based on ODA alone. It's not only donations from international donors that will get this going. The cost is enormous. So we need to look at partnerships differently, as Manuel also said. And so this is partnerships with the private sector, with research and big tech and so on, but also while not forgetting that a lot of the successful examples, including the ones that we all mentioned, actually have sprung out of local initiatives and local innovation and local courage to use and apply some of these technologies. So it's a very intricate, I think you called it ecosystem of new partnerships where you have local initiative in a way paired up with some seed money, with partnerships, private sector, and so on. And I think both ECHO, but also the UN and particularly OCHA, have a sort of a translation and a connectivity function, and not only think about it in terms of replacing what we're doing just through a different mode of doing it. So scale up, yes, but including thinking about the monies and the partnerships in a very different way from what we have done so far. Related to that is, I think, the issue that we also touched upon before. I think we're only at the beginning of realizing that turning these operations into mainstream requires also adjustments in our internal organizational structures, organizational transformation, skills levels that people have to have, focus on structures and expertise that we often don't have, or only in an underdeveloped manner. The inclusion into aid packages, to what extent, the cyber resilience that I mentioned. So we're only at the beginning of this organizational transformation, and I do think that that's going to take quite a while heeding what Balthasar said before, never to go fully digital, never replace the proximity and boots on the ground principle of engaging with communities will still be have the priority.
Thank you. Thank you. Balthasar.
Perhaps to build on what Manuel and Hans-Jörg said, I think it has to be people-centric. It's very important that it's not technology that drives that we do, but it's really the humanitarian impact that we want to generate and the interests of the people. that should drive our responsible use of technological solutions. So the do no harm, do no digital harm has to be on our mind. I think in a policy space, we need to ensure that humanitarian data, the data that humanitarian organizations collect from people, are never used against them. And we have to push at the policy side, as the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement has started to do in the last international conference, this notion that humanitarian data should not be used for any other purpose. I think it will be a key fault line in the years to come, and it's one that I hope that we can really win and have that as a principle that is respected by all stakeholders. I think we also have to hold ourselves accountable, and donors have to hold organizations accountable, so that they have data protection policies that are independently overseen and verified. That should be a standard that humanitarian organizations should meet in tomorrow's world, given the importance of humanitarian data and the vulnerabilities that humanitarian data, if falling in the wrong hands, could create for the people. It was mentioned, of course, the partnership, the R&D with academia, with the private sector, among humanitarian organizations. Very important that we invest in these partnerships, that we also accept, that we test, and that we may fail, and that this is also acceptable, because it's a new domain for many humanitarian organizations, and new digital services need to be explored, and we must test our assumptions. We, for instance, look at creating, we have created a Red Safe platform in which we pilot currently a digital vault function where people can upload survival critical documents in certain contexts. Will that be a service that people will need? It's our hypothesis this is the case, but we have to test our hypothesis and see how the reality then responds to these hypotheses. It's also, as an ecosystem of humanitarian organizations and donors, we have to be very honest and lucid about the downsides of technology. So I think in this sense, having a rigorous and thoughtful approach towards technology will not only allow us to harness the potential, the enormous potential for good of digital technologies, but also to mitigate the risks that are equally important in these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. I think it's been a very dense but rich discussion. Again, DG ECHO has been supporting digital innovation for a number of years through the Innovation Prize, but also through harnessing the Enhanced Capacity Program. And there we have also in 2021 focused on the issue of digital safety, but also interoperability, which is an issue that was a key priority of the ERC, and for this year also digital inclusion and also ethical challenges, because there I think the point that you made, that do no digital harm, is going to be key in all of this as we move forward. In terms of the issues that you see as needing to be addressed in terms of moving forward, I'm hearing scaling up, the creation of communities of practice, developing an ecosystem, access to technology, that's an interesting one, engaging with partnerships and they're, you know, beyond perhaps the classical partnerships that we would think of in terms of the humanitarian space, and also to ensure this do no digital harm. So these are the issues that I think are areas where we have to continue to explore in conversation with partners to see how to adopt the right way forward in all these areas. So given the time, I'm sorry we started late, but we'll also have the closing session to participate in. So I'd like to thank you. Thank you, Manuel, for keeping the stage occupied together with me. And thank you to all of you for taking the time and also for your insights and the start of a conversation to be held also in future. So thank you very much. Thank you.